But by expanding Medicaid, in my opinion, not only do you get health care into the hands of the people who need it, but you also create jobs. Florida has a shortage of nurses. Can't find them. My wife just gave birth to our 5-month-old child, Davis, and we had to get a nurse who came from Ponte Vedra Beach to prep her for surgery because we didn't have enough of the nurses that we needed here at the time to do the work that needed to be done, right? That shouldn't be our problem in the 3rd largest state in America, right? It should be better than that. It's one of the reasons why I have come out for Medicaid for all, right? Because it's expensive, and in my belief, it's a human right. It's a human right, right? Not a privilege, but a human right that ought to be. There's some things that are fundamental to the government and in contract with its people that we ought to be able to take care of and make provision for, right? And so, y'all, I'm running for governor because I believe it's time for a change in the state of Florida. That we have an opportunity in 2018 to turn back these wheels, these very regressive wheels in the state of Florida. And the reason why I believe we have a chance to do this is because the last 2 races that Democrats have run for governor, these last 2 races, the Democrat has lost by 1 point. Less than 1 point. Fewer than 70,000 people have decided who the governor of the state would be in a state of 20 million, right? Between y'all, Facebook friends, and mine, we got that. I'm not joking. How many friends you got? 400, 300, 200, 1,000, 3,000? I have 5 and, I don't know, 10,000 followers, right? So between us, we got people we know that we can activate. What if each of us took responsibility for turning out 10 other students, right? That's how you win elections, y'all. And you know what? We've got to get that strategic, because the absence of us being that strategic, we lose. We lose. Lastly, I want to hit the issue of public safety, which is a local one. But it's one worth hitting because it's one that's been in the news of late. The city of Tallahassee, like many cities, are still struggling with what it is that we do to make sure that we create a safer community for all folks. And this last weekend, we had our own brash of violent shootings that took place. 6 shootings in a span of 4 days. Now, we believe that there's a criminal element that this is all connected to. Nonetheless, that's pretty bad. And we've got to get our hands wrapped around that. And in our city, I can tell you some of what we've done, and it's important to know that with crime is one of those systemic things, right? It's not one of those things you flip the light switch on and off, right? You just don't wave a wand and it ends and it's over, largely because there are issues and conditions that exist in a society below the surface that quite frankly fester for a while before we get to a point where people are picking up guns and deciding they're going to aim it at another human being to take another life, right? There are very few instances where it just flips the switch with folks. It happens, but that's not how we view crime. It's much more systemic and largely having to do with poverty, absence of opportunity, right? And so we've got to do everything that we can to get at some of these more systemic issues. And so what we've done as a city, yes, we've hired more law enforcement officers, but what we've also done has leaned into restorative justice as a way of dealing with systemic crime. And what does that mean? That means instead of putting people before judges, particularly our young people, for a court of law and a judge being told that they've committed some crime against the inanimate state of Florida, we sit them before community panels. There's Jefferson, there's Jackson, there's Davis, maybe the victim, maybe the victim's family, and they get told how what they did impacted us, the community. And what we've learned in our youth juvenile justice programs, where we put those folks through restorative justice work, the average recidivism rate in this state amongst this population of people is about 40%, which means 4 out of 10 of them go on to repeat that crime within 6 months. Amongst our cohort for the last 6 years, 96% of them never go on to repeat that offense over that same observation period of time, right? It's not because they're so brilliant, it's because it works. It's called smart justice policies. And a lot of times we don't make way for that in the context of public policy making and problem solving. But in my opinion, that's exactly what is necessary to change behaviors, to change communities, to change lives, and to change future trajectories. That we gotta be willing to make that kind of an investment. As a mayor, I've also banned the bots in my city. We don't ask about criminal background history unless answering yes to that question is a disqualifier for a job. If it isn't a disqualifier for a job, we are going to measure you on your merits. Can you do the job? Will you make a good employee? How dedicated would you be? And what we've learned amongst those employees is that they're some of the best workers we have in the government. And guess what else? I believe it is one of the best deterrents to crime. When people are working, they ain't out trying to rob you, right? When they're earning a wage and they're making ends meet, they don't care about you, they care about their families and how they take care of them. And unfortunately, in this state of Florida, we have an unforgiving criminal justice system. You make a mistake and you play for a lifetime. Can't get a job, never be able to dig out of it, right? So there has to be a balanced approach. Have we hired more law enforcement officers? Yes, 46 of them. Putting them flooding the zones, continuing to be present, right? But we also have to get at some of these systemic issues that keep people from the elements of criminality and to going deeper into the criminal justice system, right? I'm gonna end here, and then I wanna take your questions, and I'm sure y'all have many. Y'all are smart Democrats on the campus of the Florida State University and on the campus of TCC, Tallahassee Community College, a top 10 community college in the country. One of the ways that we're going to win this race is being willing to go everywhere, right? I think Democrats have too long treated the race for governor as if it's the electoral college. You pick up this county, forget about that county. Get this county, forget about that county. And in the numbers, the person who wins is the one who gets one more vote. And that one more vote may come from anywhere through the length and the breadth of the state of Florida, which is why we have to be willing to go there and to compete. I visited this area a couple of months ago called the Villages. And some of y'all know about the Villages. Others don't, and I'm gonna tell you, it is, aside from some other unsavory stats, is the most conservative voting precinct in the country. More Republicans per capita than any place else. So you're like, Gillum, what were you doing? And I'll tell you, I went there because there are voters there. And there's some of our voters there. I wasn't sure how many there were, but we went for a meet and greet, and when I got there, thinking I was gonna meet maybe 50, 75 folks, I showed up and this room was teeming with over 500 retirees. Almost not another face that looked like mine. And that's okay. And I talked to them about my ambitions for the state of Florida, what I think we can accomplish if we get in this thing together. Took some questions from them, and when I finished, the leader of this group, he wasn't a leader, but you know, he acted like it. He stood up and he said, I believe Andrew Gillum ought to be the next governor. I want to put $20 behind your campaign. That was the same contribution my mother gave me, so I took that gladly. But then he turned to the room and said, if you believe Gillum ought to be governor, I want you to put $5, $10, or $20 behind him. And then they took up a collection, and when they finished, y'all, they had raised nearly $6,000 in $5, $10, and $20 contributions, right? In the place they told me I wasn't supposed to go, that where I wasn't gonna be welcomed, where these were folks who didn't believe what I believed. And the truth is that if you are in the panhandle of the state of Florida, and maybe you're a working class white voter, but maybe your kid is being pushed out of the public education system due to high stakes testing, which by the way doesn't tell us what a kid knows, but how well they take a test. Or if you're working multiple jobs to make ends meet, or your cousin or brother or son or daughter is opioid addicted, you are as frustrated with what's going on as the similarly situated urban voter, right? But they need to know that we care and that we see that and that we want to do something about those issues and those concerns. And that we have that in common. And that we have to ignore the noise that would tell them that they have to hate me because my hue is darker, or hate a female because she stepped into the workforce and now you're struggling to make ends meet, that is a fallacy. And that we got a lot more in common than what divides us. That there are a lot more of than there are of. I told you before we finish, y'all would have that. But that's true, right? And they gotta know that we care enough to show up. And that we care enough to have tough conversations. And that we care enough because if we get elected governor, we're their governor too, right? And we gotta know what makes them afraid, what freaks them out, what encourages them, what inspires them, so we can do a better job meeting their needs too. And so I'm committed to that. And I already told y'all that we lost this state by 1 point. Now I wanna win, not just to be governor, I wanna win because I know frankly, what we lose when we lose elections, right? We get a governor who's a climate change denier. We give folks who hate on immigrants and use every opportunity in the public space to make us turn against one another. We lose the opportunity to extend Medicaid and healthcare to 1.5 million folks. Women's reproductive health decisions end up in the hands of people who have no reason, right, to have that decision-making ability other than the fact that they want to take it, right? Our kids who are being told they attend failure factories, the folks who are making the choice to attend college in this state and don't want to graduate from under a mountain of debt, right? Those are the folks who lose when we lose elections. So we gotta win. And I know one thing, I can't do it without y'all. Cannot do it without you. Certainly can't do it by myself. So I need as many of y'all who are willing to join us on this effort to say, you know what, it's time to take our state back. We are not gonna win as Democrats if we won Republican light. We're not gonna win as Democrats by backing down to our foes, by surrendering to the NRA. We're not gonna win. We have to give our folks a reason to show out and to show up. And if we do that, I believe that we can close that 70,000 vote gap with some change to spare, take back the governor's mansion, the Senate, the House, and then appoint the next wave of Supreme Court justices to the Florida Supreme Court, and all the justices and judges that come below that, right? That's what it's gonna take, but we gotta be fiercely unapologetic about what we're trying to achieve. We gotta be unapologetic about registering voters, talking to voters about their needs and concerns, and making sure that we show up in the primary and in the general election in 2018, and then show up again in 2020 to get this bum out of the White House, right? I'm done, and I'm prepared to take your questions. I really appreciate y'all allowing me to. At the very back, and if you don't mind saying your name or your major, would be great.
I'm a Spanish linguistic student, master's student actually. I'm from Massachusetts.
Welcome.
So great state, you know, one of the first states to make everyone come here.
That's right.
We expanded Medicaid, and I'm looking forward to changing Florida for the better. I have a question. What are your plans for college affordability? In the past, Bright Futures was at 100%, and it changed, I think like 5 years ago. Are you planning on bringing it back 100% or something more general?
Yeah, so one of the things that we put out, and I don't know if we formally released our proposal on this, but we have particularly, one, I'm a big fan of Bright Futures and have despised what we've seen the legislature do to that by sifting away the richness of the benefits there, right? There was a contract made. You do well, you do what you're supposed to do up through high school. We'll make sure that you get rewarded by the opportunity to access college. The other thing that we put out there is for those individuals who go into majors that are high need areas for the state of Florida. So particularly nurses, teachers, believe it or not, even in forestry, we have a deficit, right? So if you're willing to go into those areas and give us 4 years, similar to what you might see in the national service scholarship realm, you give us 4 years, we give you 4 years. You give us 2 years through a trade program, we'll give you 2 years and pay for that piece of your education. More importantly though, we've got to make sure that and I have to give the legislature credit. They did increase the amount of need-based aid this last year, and now that we're showing up this year. I don't know what did it to them. I don't know if y'all went down and visited them or if your parents wrote to them, but it was a good move, but we've got to keep the trend moving in that direction. And then I've been in favor and put out a service scholars program, which is, aside from the merit of you being able to graduate from college, you give us the years we need, we're willing to reimburse your tuition after we get the years that we need of service back in the state. And I have to tell you, this is the double bottom line here. One, it is to help to facilitate the affordability of college and folks being able to get college for free. But the other benefit is that because of the way we have crapped on a lot of these professions, young people don't want to go in them anymore. We made them unsavory. We don't pay them well. We demonize them. We hold teachers accountable for all the ills of society, right? All of it. And then when it comes time to recruit folks into those areas, they're not interested. And the same is true in the medical spaces and many others. So the double bottom line is that we get the benefit of your service back to the state. And what you get is you get a free education.
So you think that would help rebuild the workforce?
I think it would totally help rebuild the workforce and strengthen the workforce for jobs that are paying livable wages, right? So we've had a governor who runs around the state saying, Jobs, governor, jobs, 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 jobs. And what we've interpreted that to mean, obviously, is you need multiple jobs if you're gonna be able to live and survive in this state, right? You better be creating jobs, jobs, jobs if I need 3 or 4, or 2 or 3 to work, right? And so, what I'm interested in, and I'll give you an example of what we tried to pilot here in our own city. We competed for and got from the Obama administration a tech hire designation for the work that we're doing to train the next generation of workers for tech jobs that exist today. In partnership with LinkedIn, we did a survey and found that we, on average, had 550 jobs available at the time in the tech sector. Tech used liberally, not writing code, but tech used liberally. And those jobs, when advertised, on average between 10 and 12 months, right? So what does that tell us? That means we have a skills gap. There's a mismatch. We're not producing the folks who have the skills to then walk into those jobs, which by the way are good paying jobs. And so our plan would be, one, is to supersize that over the state. That we've got to make sure that, yeah, we want to recruit companies into the state and use the resources of Enterprise Florida to recruit new industry in the state, but we also want to make sure that we're training the talent to then walk into those jobs. And so my recommendation would be, is that we create scholarship programs similar to what we announced through our IO Academy in partnership with FSU, FAMU, Domi Station, where we're going through a 10-week course training folks in the tech sector in partnership with employers, and all the employers have said is if you graduate with competency in this area, we'll hire you, right? So we got retirees, we have mid-career professionals, we have folks who are just graduating from high school and are not on a college-bound track, getting equipped with those skills, and when they finish, it's our job to make sure that they have a job, right? And I think we've got to think about what does the future economy of this state look like? This governor and this legislature have been fine with us being, our future economy being built on low-wage work and largely tourism. And I'm saying, yeah, we may have tourism as a feather in our cap, but we need new industry. We need innovation. We need tech. We ought to be leading on green energy and green energy innovations, right? We ought to bring the film credit back. Georgia has taken over all the movies that used to be made in Florida because we suspended that in favor of giving corporations tax breaks rather than trying to recruit jobs into the state that are good paying jobs and that help this industry and that help that industry and help our state by and large. So I think that's the kind of thinking we have to do. And like I said, we just need a North Star, and that's what we're lacking in that area. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Matthew Ferris from Parkland. So I have a question about the speaker's education bill that was signed by the governor just a few months ago, right?
7069.
Yeah, so can you explain your position on that?
Yeah, my position is completely against
Right,
it.
yeah.
And I appreciate the question.
Sure.
There was a piece in the Sun Sentinel today, I believe it was, that talked about the $1 billion private sector education industry that has grown up in the state of Florida. That billion referenced the amount of money that has gone from the state budget that would have otherwise gone into the public system into these privately run charter schools, right? Corporate, for-profit charter schools. And what this expose showed is that you got some of these charter schools that are in strip malls, that these kids are showing up, every one of the desks in the class is partitioned off. The kid gets like an hour of interface with a teacher. There's no accountability. They don't have to pass high stakes testing, not that I agree with them anyway, but they hold the public schools accountable to that, but then don't hold the for-profit run private schools to the same standard, right? And so we've now created two worlds. And I have to tell you, it's my belief that the Republican leadership is hell-bent on seeing public education come to an end. They're much more in favor of the privatizing of the education system in the state, of which I'm completely against. And 7069, which takes money away from the public system and allows now charters to compete for construction dollars, when we got folks in public schools where buildings and windows and cracks and leaky roofs are all around them, right? But now we're ciphering that money off into the private system. I believe that there's a court challenge that ought to be waged against this. There is a public contract that exists between the public and its government that every kid, no matter where you live, no matter where you're from, ought to have an exact opportunity to learn as anybody else. Any similarly situated any person, right? And that's not true. That mandate is not being fulfilled. And so I'm against 7069 and would work toward its repeal. But the other thing that we have to do is we gotta think really smart about our public system, right? And so, in my opinion, it doesn't just begin at kindergarten. 0 to 5 is where it's at. Over 90% of brain development over the course of human life take place between the ages of 0 and 5. I mean, over the course of your life on earth, 90% of your brain is developed between that point. 40% of our kids are starting kindergarten in this state not ready to learn. that same percentage by the time they get to third grade are not on grade level reading. And you know what kind of predictions start getting made, jail beds, right? And so the issue is so systemic. If 4 out of 10 of your kids aren't ready to learn, teachers are then spending the next 12 years trying to get you caught up. And by the way, that achievement gap continues to grow between that period. It doesn't shrink. So we're not doing it right. We gotta make sure that we have universal, high quality early childhood education available to every family and means tested for those who are low income, because those are the ones who are largely populating that 40%. And then by the time that you get to the kindergarten, we ought to make sure you're ready, and that between those years, up to the point of 9th grade, and between 9th and 12th grade, we ought to reinfuse what we used to have when I matriculated in this state system. We used to have trades. We used to have woodwork and shop and technical and electrical training, all that kind of stuff. So if you weren't on a college-bound track, you could get a skill that you could monetize, go get a job that could lead to a career. And we've all but pushed that out of this system, leaving those kids who are not on a college-bound track, and I know that's not us, but there are a lot of them who are not, leaving them to basically say, you know, fend for yourself, right? No life for you afterwards. Go find your low-wage work, your low-wage job, and figure it out. And I just don't believe that we have talent to waste in this state. So we ought to figure out useful ways to make sure that we use the talents of everybody who's on the board. And I think part of that is making sure that we get the skills training in our 9th through 12th grade system, and that for those who are on a college-bound track, that you can graduate without being under a mountain of debt. Appreciate your question. Did I see a, yes ma'am?
My name is Elise. I'm a public relations major from Orlando. You mentioned briefly women's reproductive
Yes.
issues, women's health care. I was just wondering, as governor, like how you would protect our access to Planned Parenthood and combat any trap laws that may surround it.
Absolutely, and there are plenty of trap laws that every year get introduced as these folks seek to make choices around women's reproductive health that they have no right or real rhyme or reason for being able to make. So one, you would see a fierce defender in me of a woman's right to make her own reproductive health decisions. I believe, first of all, you know that the work of Planned Parenthood is vast, that many women have gotten their diagnoses around breast cancer and other forms of diseases by their treatment and access to treatment through Planned Parenthood. And obviously, they make their own reproductive health decisions through those organizations. In this state, we actually determined that a pre-existing condition is a pregnant woman, right? And we, on state statute, allow for insurers to discriminate against women with pre-existing conditions. The only thing that stops that from happening is the existence of Obamacare, right? And the fact that the law now says you cannot do that. That's the law of the land that President 45 is attempting to strip back, right? And so I think we ought to adopt our own language around pre-existing conditions and around guaranteeing a woman's right to make her own reproductive health decisions in the state of Florida, and making sure that in every form of the insurance and regulatory sector that we have control over in the state, that we validate that rationale in law and in statute. And that's something that we found ourselves so often on the defensive, pushing back against their horrible policies. I'd love to be able to plan with groups like Planned Parenthood and NARAL around what are some affirmative steps that we could take to make sure that we're shoring up the guardrails around making sure we protect a woman's right to choose, and also a woman's right to access health care and life-saving health care in the state of Florida. I think in this state we've not had those kind of fierce defenders, and you would certainly find that in me. And that's been, frankly, the story of my work really up to this point in the public sector. That's always been my position. Any other questions? I know I've held y'all hostage. Means you got the last question.
My name's Danny. I'm a history major. You were talking a lot about like your stance towards like LGBT and those kinds of things. Something that's like super concerning for me being a member of the community, while it doesn't directly affect me, is the rate at which trans women of color are disproportionately killed in the country. So like, how do you think we should go about combating it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we need strong laws. One, it ought to be included in all state and federal hate crimes.